let's move on to main quest number 1. And main quest number 1 is a little birdie has saying that Piers has completed Dragonsong's Reprise. Congratulations, sir. Now that one of you has completed it, what is your ultimates tier list, and what is one good part and one bad part from each ultimate? Well, I'm gonna let you start because you're the one that finished it. So let's break down your tier list. Like rank them 1 to 4. Where do you put them?
Man, I don't know. Let's see. Thank you, by the way, for the congratulations. It was a long and drawn out process, but I'm happy that we finally were able to get it done.
Yeah. Well, one thing, you started at what, 3 nights a week, right? When this whole thing started, and then you bumped up to 6 or 7 to make sure you got it done before the patch.
We went up to 6. Yes. It was taking longer than we expected. The group, when we first formed, it was a brand new group. So when we first formed, we agreed on around a 2-month clear, but given how difficult this particular ultimate was, we obviously blew past that expectation and we started moving more towards a 3-month clear. So because of that, we decided we were going to add some more hours on to try to get it done with a relatively decent amount of time before 6.2, just so we can get the totems that we want and we can leave the fight satisfied. So I feel like we did at least achieve our goal on the clear time. And I think we're going to get a decent amount of totems, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah.
Nice. So what's your number 4? Let's start with the bottom and work our way up. What's your number 4? You give your number 4 and I'll give my number 4. Me being, of course, someone that hasn't completed it.
It's such a tough call. I think number 4 has to be Uwu, and the only reason that it's Uwu is because there's not a lot of crazy bombastic things that happen in Uwu. It's a very by the books fight. You know, once you understand the mechanic of waking the primals and doing all that, and the intermission can be kind of long where you have to do all the LBs in a row. And there's no music in that fight that really like gets me hype. That's the only reason. I really do enjoy Uwu as a fight. It's just, I guess if I had to rank them, it would be my number 4.
All right. For my number 4, only because I've never actually even entered it, it's going to be the Epic of Alexander. I just never fought it, so I have no opinion of it. So I can't rank it higher than something I've actually done, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be my number 4. And Jedi Pokey in the chat. Hello, sir. How are you today? All right. Number 3, Piers. What's your number 3?
Number 3 is the tough one. I think I'm going to have to probably give it to the Epic of Alexander. It's a tough one because, I know I really do enjoy T quite a bit. I think that the first phase can drag on a lot. I think having to go all the way back to Living Liquid every time you wipe is annoying, and there's nothing really crazy about that phase that I enjoy having to do over and over again. I think the second phase, which is Brute Justice and Cruise Chaser, I think that is a very fun phase with really great music. I think it flows really well. I think that Alexander Prime can tend to be a little long-winded. I think Inception, which is the first trio in that phase, is a little boring. Wormhole is obviously like the big mechanic in the whole fight, and that can be exciting to do. And then Perfect Alexander actually is a really fun ending sequence. I think out of all of them, it probably has my favorite ending, like victory lap, if you will. But yeah, I just have 2 that are ahead of them in fun for me. So Epic is Alexander, number 3. How about you?
Number 3 will be Uwu. And I haven't finished DSR, but I already know that I like it more than Ultima. Ultima just didn't have any moments where you're like, wow, this is like really an intriguing part of the fight. I guess the only real intriguing part is the limit break bonanza. But that's just, did you do the mechanics right in the previous 3 phases? I enjoyed the fight. I liked that it was my first ultimate that I got done. It really opened my eyes to what ultimates are. So that was a good experience. And prepared me for doing, the other 2 ultimates that I've worked on. So that's going to be my number 3, just because yeah, there was nothing that really gripped me as far as that this is an amazing aspect of this fight. All right, what's number 2 for you, Piers?
Number 2 is DSR. It's Dragonsong's Reprise.
Mm.
I think this fight, hot take, I think the fight is a little overtuned. I think it is a little bit more difficult than people were expecting it to be. I think that it requires a lot of personal responsibility, more so than other ultimates. Every ultimate does require personal responsibility. Sure. Some phases and other, in fights more than others, like in BJCC, in T, it requires a lot of personal responsibility. But in this one, it is a lot of personal responsibility. There's almost no mechanic that you can get by just kind of following somebody or just going with the flow. You have to know what you're doing at all times, and you have to know like every single variation of every mechanic to be able to execute it correctly. And it's just one of those things that really puts a lot of pressure on each individual person. There is a lot of fun in that. There's a lot of satisfaction in that when you finally get everything down and everything looks like that glorious synchronized dance that you want it to look like. But man, hogging it can be really painful sometimes because everybody learns at different speeds. And everybody gets consistent at different speeds. And when you feel like you know a mechanic and you see other people struggling with it, and there's really nothing you can do for them but let them get those reps in, it's frustrating at times. But the music is fantastic. I mean, every single Heaven's Word theme that you would think is an iconic Heaven's Word theme is somewhere in that fight. I think it's super thematic. I think that the whole theme of you living out an alternate timeline is really interesting. And overall, I think the victory lap phase is interesting. And I just, and a lot of it is probably biased that I just completed it, but I do think it stands on where it stands. The only problem I have with it is I think it's a little overtuned. But yeah, DSR is my number 2. How about you?
I'm going to go with Ukab, Ultimate Unending Coil of Bahamut. Doing that with you and Winnie, Mimi, Ultima, and the rest of the people that were with us. It was where Uwu was, one level and got my feet wet with ultimates. Ukab showed me that this is where ultimates could be, and the amount of dedication and the amount of prep you need to have. Really looking back at what you did or did not do, really honed in on, this is another level. I really enjoyed that one. And I'm glad we got so many kills when we did. I wish I had done it on content, but getting it done is still, an achievement in itself. So, I love the dance with Nail. I love Golden Bahamut phase. While it's still a victory lap, as you say, if you make a mistake, you can wipe the raid and everyone's back to Twintania and everyone's just like, oh my God, please, we had it. So yeah, I love Ukab as my number 2. So I guess number 1 for you would be Ukab, right?
Yeah, I guess it's weird for me to say that because, I do have positive things to say about every ultimate. I do have negative things to say about every ultimate. But maybe it's the fact that it was my first, those rose tinted glasses. But there's just something about Ukab that kind of transcends all the other fights for me. Twintania is a boring phase. It's a lot like Living Liquid and T, where like you just don't. When you get sent back there, you don't feel like doing it. But it's one of those phases where you can kind of turn your brain off for a while.
Yeah.
So like when you go back there, you don't feel as bad because you're just like, another Twintania pull. We're not going to wipe, like it's hard to wipe in Twintania. We're going to get back there. So it doesn't feel as bad. Where like Living Liquid, you kind of have to use your brain a little bit. So I guess I kind of do like Twintania a little bit more, though. I think that the theme Thunder is boring. It's boring. Yeah. But I feel you with Nail. I think Nail is probably the best feeling phase out of like any ultimate to do. And it's weird. A lot of second phases have that feel because BJCC for me is also like a really good feeling phase, and so is it's the Nidstinian or whatever in Dragonsong, right?
Kyle.
Like
Yeah,
they all
Kyle.
feel really good to do. It's like this really synchronized dance. I don't know. Square Enix has got this like second phase nailed in no pun intended, because nail. And they just got it nailed down. Besides Ifrit, I guess, and Uwu, but Ifrit is whatever. It feels really good to do nail. I think learning the call outs and doing that dance and the fire tether is all really cool and exciting. And I think Bahamut Prime can be a little boring because there's so many downtime. It's literally just uptime, and then it's a trio, then it's uptime trio, and it's like a long extended thing of that. But I think the trios themselves are interesting and fun to do. I think that the DPS check is lenient enough in that phase where you can get by with a few mistakes and still get it, even when it was on content.
Oh yeah.
Even when it was on content, you could still have some screw ups in pretty much any phase in that fight and still eke by a win. And I do like that level of leniency, though I know a lot of people don't like that because it is supposed to be an ultimate. But for me, I like being able to at least raise people and let them, experience the next mechanic.
Sure.
Instead of having to, one person screw up and having to go all the way back. So for me, that's great. I think the ads phase is super exciting and super intense. I think that's probably the most intense part of the whole fight because it's, it's a lot of mechanics. Yeah, it's a lot of mechanics going on at once, and you got to nail it because you're right there, like right near the end, and it's like the real last mechanical check of the fight.
Sure.
And then Golden's just like super adrenaline, man. The theme is blaring in your ear. It's that super like upbeat, crazy theme. You got Golden Bahamut slamming down these crazy damaging raid wides that you have to mitigate properly, and Exaflares are a one-shot kill, and you got to make sure you dodge them, even though it's not that hard. It's super duper hard when you're sweaty and you're shaking.
Yeah, after 15 minutes or 14, 15 minutes, and then you're like, okay, just got to do these Exaflares properly. I'm in the wrong spot, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. And overall, just putting it all together, I think the fight is really well done. It has gotten easier as time has gone by. I don't think it's gotten hit as hard as Uwu. Uwu has gotten a lot easier since time has gone by, but there's still enough challenge in Ukab where you still feel satisfied when you clear it every time. And I think they nailed it with Ukab, but this is comparing things in my mind that are very close to each other. Like, I don't think any fight goes below like an 8 point or like an 8 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're all really solid.
Yeah, fights. They're all high quality. We're ranking them, but it's not like any of them are F tier. Like, they're all B tier or above.
Yeah, like and Uwu is a great fight for the your first ultimate. It introduces you into the level of difficulty you should be expecting, and for that I think it's leaps and bounds over the other ones because it's like the accessible ultimate, and I like it for that. And so yeah, don't feel like any lesser if you want to go do Uwu. It's a great fight. It's fun. The weapons are awesome, and you'll have a really good time if you decide to do that one. So yeah. That's where I'm at.
All right. Well, my number one, I guess, is going to be DSR, and I haven't even finished it.
Yeah.
For all the things that you said, the music, I mean, it's some of the choicest pieces from Heaven's Ward. Iconic characters. I mean, who didn't want Thornton to come back and face him again? His Extreme was one of the best. Nidhogg, I loved Nidhogg's fight. So having him back was, thank you. I'll have more. Where you don't necessarily like the fact that there's a lot of single person accountability issues, I actually appreciate that. I think it brings that challenge up. I don't think they can go above this in difficulty. At that point, you're like, okay, well, we need like 2 months or two patch cycles to really get this down. So I appreciate the difficulty that it's at. I like a difficult part, but not impossible. So I appreciate this. I like that it's telling its own story. The rewind, yes, you're going through the first couple phases and it's a retread of the story, but the fact that it's a rewind and it's got its own story is absolutely unique in this regard, where everything else is basically just a retelling. This is its own little story where it's like, well, what could have happened? So I hope they do something like this again in the future. yeah, it's just, and you're right. They got the phase twos down to just a wonderful dance. It is frustrating when you're like the first person to know it and you're trying to give hints and tips and stuff. But once it's down, it's like, yeah, that feels real good.
Yeah.
Thornton is not Twintanya.
No.
And is not Garuda or Ifrit. It's another level of frustration when you have to go back to it, because you can still wipe in Thornton. Sanctity still has its challenges, especially if you get a curse pattern in the Fire and Ice Tower. So it's my number one for those reasons, and I love it. It's good, and I can't wait to actually. By the way, I need to find a group, so if anybody needs a sage that would love to do.
Yeah.
I'm flexible in my hours Monday through Friday. Anyways, so we got our tier list down. Let's go one by one and one of the highlights and one of the lowlights from each fight. And let's start with Uwu. What is your what is the highlight and the lowlight for you from Uwu?
I think the highlight would have to probably be, man, it's a tough call. Probably Titan phase. I think Titan phase probably feels the best. I know nowadays people are using illicit tools to make Titan a lot easier by using auto markers, which is fine. If that makes it easier for you, it's whatever. I don't think Titan jails are that difficult as is, but if you really need the tools, they're there. But I do like nailing down Titan jails. I think that's really good once you finally like get a feeling for it. I think that the phase flows really well. I like dodging all the landslides and stuff like that. And the intermission is boring, but I will say that it's really cool to do it. It's just not so cool when you're doing it for like the 100th time.
Sure.
So that would be like a secondary highlight for me. What's your highlight in Uwu? What do you like about it?
Titan jails is up there, but for me, getting suppression down, knowing that you're going, what is it? Annihilation is the last one.
It goes predation, annihilation, suppression. So suppression is the last one.
Suppression. So once you get suppression down, and you're like, okay, that's the last trio, I guess you could call it. That's the one part that I think is fun, but it's so late in the fight.
Yeah. That
you know once you get it down, you're pretty much at the end, and you just gotta do a couple more mechanics until enrage. If something like that was early in the fight, like Ifrit or Titan, maybe it would be higher on my list, but you just see it so infrequently. That's hard to give it a thumbs up there. I'm not a big fan of the Titan jails. It's nice when you finally get it down, but it's something that I feel it doesn't need third-party tools, and it doesn't need voice comms, but voice comms really do help when you can just be like, I got 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. And you go to your spots. So yeah, that's my highlights and lowlights for that. Since I haven't done Alexander, tell me about Alexander. What's your highlights and lowlights for Alexander?
Sure. So highlight is definitely BJCC. I think that the phase flows really, really well. I like the passing of the Nisi. I like the stacking of the water. I like passing lightning. I like how everybody has to know each other's pathing, because in that phase, everybody. So 4 people have Nissis. There's 4 people with Nissi at any given time. Usually, it's like it's either utility or it's DPS, and so depending on who gets it first will determine who's passing it at certain times. There's not a huge difference depending on who gets it first, but there's a little bit. And if anybody accidentally touches each other in that phase, it's a complete wipe. There's almost no way to recover if anybody touches each other with Nissi. So everybody has to know each other's pathing. It's really, really fun to learn your own pathing, to know when you can move and when it's safe to move. I think that the music is fantastic. I think that the DPS check is not too difficult, but it is hard enough to where you have to still be damaging the bosses while doing this intricate dance and making sure you're not touching anybody else. The end of the phase is kind of boring because Nissi goes away and it's basically just beating down 2 bosses, which is fine. But overall, I think that phase is fantastic. And I think Perfect Alexander itself as a phase is really fun as well. So that'd be my secondary highlight of the fight. Low light for T absolutely has to be Living Liquid. You get sick of that theme Locust after a while. I remember I just did a mental roulette not too long ago, or was it a normal mode roulette? Whichever it was, I got an Alexander fight. I think it was the Fist of the Sun, and when we got to the final boss, somebody in the alliance or in the party was like, "Man, this theme is bopping," and I was like, "Not when you've done T for like 150 hours. It's not bopping. You just don't want to hear this ever again." So,
good times.
So yeah, that for me is where I stand on T. Really, really fun fight. Just Living Liquid can be a bit of a slog after a while. Trust me on that.
All right, dude. Well, let's move on to Ukab. And I guess I'll start since you did Alexander. Ukab, highlight is Nail. The dance with fire and ice, doom puddles, lightning, ins and outs. It's a well choreographed piece. You call it a set piece. It's really pretty awesome. There's some RNG elements to it, but everyone's gonna have, everyone needs to know what to do with each part because everyone's gonna get these parts probably at least once. So to get that down and see the flowing, it's like, all right, in, out, fire out, lightning, go away. All of that I feel is pretty well done. Low light for me, it's kind of a tie between Twin Tanya and Heaven's Fall. I just think the timing on Heaven's Fall is a little bit tight. If they gave like another 2 seconds, you could have a lot more consistency with it. Maybe even just 1 second before it comes down and you get that knockback. Some people have a lot of hard time finding Nail and then tracking their tower, left or right from wherever or however, whatever strat you use. And then Twin Tanya as low light 1A. It's just so mind numbing, especially when you're progging 10 minutes, 15 minutes into the fight. I can only imagine doing the prologue of DSR over and over again.
Yeah,
how annoying that would be. That would be on the same level as doing Twin Tanya over and over and over again. So yeah, overall, I love the fight, but yeah, those are my 2 lowlights for Ukab. How about you, sir?
Sure. So highlights of Ukab. I know I kind of mentioned this when I was discussing how it was my favorite, but like you said, I mean, there's not much to say more about Nail that hasn't already been said, but I think that it is a very well choreographed thing. I think that there's a lot of elegance in that phase. More so than you might think there is, in the sense that like even something as simple as everybody is going to get every mechanic in that phase at some point, and knowing that, you can sort of put yourself in a mindset where you kind of know what's going to happen, right? If you're paying attention in Nail and you see that you haven't gotten lightning yet, then you can say to yourself, okay, I'm going to have lightning on this last part, and I know that I'm going to have to go in and then, to get that fire and then move immediately away with lightning because you're going to have to deal with that, right? So there's just things that you can kind of predict in that phase, and I think that's kind of what makes the phase really fun. I think the quotes are a lot of fun. I think the quotes were more fun when they were more convoluted. I know they made them easier to understand for everybody else, but I'm somebody who had to learn them all back when they were convoluted and you had to look for certain keywords, but now it's pretty simple to understand what the quotes are. The phases, the DPS check is not very difficult, so you don't really have to worry about that too much if you don't have too many deaths, but even if you have a death, you can work around it. I just think it's a very well done phase. And yeah, that's definitely my highlight. For my low, it's got to be Twin Tanya for everything you said. It's just super mind numbing. I think most first phases of Ultimate fights are like this. I think some are more. You can tolerate some more than others. Like I said, for Living Liquid, I just do not like that phase. very much. But for Twintania, it's something that I can kind of just do without thinking about it too much.
Yeah.
So it's just like, you know, delete 2.5 minutes from my life because I'm doing Twintania again. Whatever. It's, you know, it's not hard. It's simple. Though I will say that learning how to do random liquid hells in Twintania definitely made me better at Wrath of the Heavens in DSR. So having that experience will help you in the future in other ultimates. So there is at least that.
I do love where Square can take mechanics from previous fight and add them with different ones and mix them up in different ways to provide some new challenges. So I do appreciate that when they do that.
Yeah, for sure. For me though, in the trios, I actually like Heaven's Fall a little bit more than 10 Strike. I think 10 Strike is a low point in that fight simply because of the physics of the orbs coming from Twintania. Yeah, they can be very inconsistent, and you can wipe in that phase without feeling like you did anything wrong at all. And I don't like that in an ultimate. I think that's wonky. So for me, 10 Strike is just kind of iffy, and it's just the patch part of 10 Strike. I think the Earthshakers thing is interesting. So, you know, that's it for me. There's not a whole lot of lowlights for me in UCOB, but yeah, just a few wonky things, right?
Sure.
I think that's it.
Sure. Well, that leaves us off with DSR, and I'll start with that. Highlight for that is Nidhogg. Just like Nail, the dance of his towers, properly baiting them, knowing that everyone's going to place a tower, everyone's going to soak a tower, everyone's going to bait a tower. When you put those in the mix, you know, you got the forward and backward airs, the high dives, but the dance of it with the in and out, it really just flows. It's a well choreographed piece, kind of like Nail. I really enjoy that part, and repeating it, I don't foresee me having an issue with it because it's just fun to do. And once you get through it, once everyone does it cleanly, it's like, yes. And then it's just, then you're worried about a DPS check at that point. So, but getting through that is a lot of fun. I do appreciate that part. Low light for me, for my limited partaking of this, is probably going to be the whole of Sanctity. Just maybe a little bit too RNG elements. And I know there's different ways to tackle the two parts of Sanctity. But having, you know, the warrior in different spots, people getting different markers and maybe having to swap depending on how you're doing it. Are you going Paladin relative? Are you going Dark Knight relative? Having the two gaze, both Thornton and the eyeball, at random points, that just sucks. And that will translate into Death of the Heavens as well. And then you take that into the second part of Sanctity, where the towers can be, you know, lopsided, and you have curse patterns, different groups getting the different meteors. Are you in? Are you out? Maybe just a little bit too much RNG. I do like it when you finally get through it. That's enjoyable, but again, maybe just a little too much RNG for me on that. What about you, sir?
All right. Highlights, like you said, with Nidhogg. I won't go too much more on that. You've said pretty much everything. So I'll pick something from a little bit further in the fight than you've been, so like we can discuss it a little bit. Let's see. Sure. I think for me, probably the final. I think Wrath of the Heavens is a lot of fun. I think it's a nice, cute little dance. There's a lot of throwbacks to UCOB there. There's twisters you got to do. There's dive bombs you got to plant. There's there's the lightning trio from Nail. Yeah, right? It's like a mishmash of a lot of UCOB stuff on top of a lot of Thornton stuff, because, you know, that part in the fight, he's like revived a bunch of dragons from the dead, and they're like, you know, he's got them under his command, and he's got his knights coming down helping him. So it's this mishmash of a bunch of stuff happening, and I think that's a lot of it's a lot of fun, and it's recoverable, and it's easy to prog, and I think for that it's a lot of fun. Death's not so much, but I'll get there later. And the final phase is great too. I remember that I gave a speech to my group right before we clear. It was our clear phase, or it was our clear run, and it was the last run of the night, and we had been memeing a little bit on our last runs. Like we wiped a couple times in Nidhogg, we wiped a couple times in Sanctity, and we were just like, okay, we don't want to go to bed with this. We want to get one more good pull in. So we got all the way to phase 7, and I just said something like, guys, this phase is no harder than an extreme primal. There's nothing in this phase that is anything harder than an extreme primal. It's all about mitigation and damage. That's it. So all we have to focus on is making sure our mitigation's on point and making sure that we do our damage. And lo and behold, we cleared that pull. So I'm telling you that phase is not very hard at all. But the it's a lot like Golden Bahamut in the sense that you have to make sure your mitigation is on point. Everybody has to hit the buttons they're supposed to hit. If you don't, you will die because the mitigation is very, very tight on everything, be it the Akmorns, be it the Giga Flares. Everything has to be done correctly. But the movement is not hard. It's very easy. As long as you don't panic and as long as you just make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do, that phase is nothing to worry about. And for that, I like it because it is a victory lap in like the purest sense. Because as long as you focus on what you're supposed to do, it's no problem. The DPS check is tight, but it's not tight if you're not panicking. So just don't panic. You got this. If you're getting to phase 7, you got this. It's not something to worry about. And for that, I really do like the final phase. So it's definitely a highlight for me. A low light, I will say, is probably Eyes phase and intermission, simply because it's not hard at all. Once you start doing those two phases properly, you will never ever wipe on them. You will wipe maybe once a week. If you're raiding like 3 or 4 days a week, you'll wipe maybe once a week on Eyes, maybe once on intermission, like every month. I'm not even kidding. Like once you get it down, you got it.
So it's like Twin Tanya, but in the middle of the fight. It's kind of a breather.
Exactly. So it is an intermission, right? You're supposed to be relaxing, but at the same time, you just want to get back to phase 6 or phase 7. Like you at that point, you're just like, okay, like let's save Horse Font. Yay. All right. He's good. Woo. Like, so in that sense, that's a low light. And I will say that there's some parts in phase 6, Double Dragons, that are a low light for me as well. I know some people I raid with really do like that phase. I will say that there are some parts of that phase that are just not fair. There are some dedicated downtime phases in that fight, or in that phase. Like in Wrath Flames, if Hraesvelgr is dive bombing on the side that Nidhogg is, you're getting downtime no matter what. If in the first Hallowed Plume, the DPS have to go far and away from Hraesvelgr, that's mandatory downtime. And I don't like that that's part of the fight, because it can really screw up the enrage timing, and it can really screw up keeping the boss's HP even. That's one of the big parts of that phase, is having to keep the boss's HP even at 2 certain parts. And I just don't like fights that have to dictate downtime like that. There's really no way you can work around it. There's no alternate strats that you can work around it to make it so that there's no downtime. There absolutely is if he does certain things, and there's no other ultimate that I can really think of that dictates downtime like that. And so in that sense, phase 6 is a little weird. I still like the phase, I do, but there's just a few things that I would maybe change about it. But gotcha. That's me. Yeah, that's me. Overall, DSR, great fight.
All right. At this point, we want to kick it to you folks. Tell us what you think about all the ultimates. Have you done them? Do you even care? Have you done them and beat them? Tell us what you think down below in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and massage that like button, drop a comment down below, and hit subscribe for more content. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and I'll see you soon. End of line.